What's up, everybody? I want to discuss some things right now about America, the state of our politics, and what's happening right now. Um, and I have so much to say on this. This is going to be a bit of a long video, but there's some things that I really want to address that I think need to be addressed. And I think that nobody's saying. So often I go on YouTube and I watch other people's videos and I just don't feel like anybody's saying what I'm about to say right now. And I feel like it needs to be said. So I want you, whoever's listening to this, I want you to imagine yourself like you're a journalist. Pretend you're a journalist. You work for like some hugely credible, like whatever, some big New York Times or Washington Post or some big news agency. You're a reporter and an investigative reporter. And someone comes up to you and they say, we want you to do a story on the Ku Klux Klan. And we want you to go undercover and we want you to investigate why there would be this group of atrocious white men who wear hoods over their heads, who want to commit atrocities against people of color. And we want you to write that story. We want you to cover that story. And so you say, okay. You're like, no problem. Fine. That's totally fine. I'm going to do that. So you go to investigate it. And while you're on the job, out of nowhere, you get a call from another higher up at the news place. And they say, hey, you know what? We really want your story to be fair and balanced. So instead of just reporting the negatives about the Ku Klux Klan and why it's bad, maybe tell the other side of the story about how it could be a good thing or how it could be justified. Maybe there's some redeeming qualities about these Ku Klux Klan members. Now, obviously, if that was the case, or if you were called and you were told to do this, chances are, I'm having faith in you right now, but chances are you're going to be like, what? There is no redeeming quality about Ku Klux Klan members. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, I can't write a fair and balanced. There's only one side to this story. This is bad, right? Period. And why? Because there are societal norms that we as the human race have kind of concurred are bad. They're morally reprehensible. We've agreed on this as a society, right? So understanding that, this is how people like me who lean left, and I do politically lean left. I would consider myself a Democrat for sure, especially economically. I have some conservative opinions on some certain social issues, but most of my social views lean left. But the reason why I brought this analogy up is because what I want you to understand is that there was a time in America when the truth was just the truth. The news just reported reality. Back in the days of Tom Brokaw and Peter Jennings and Walter Cronkite, the news was just the news, man. It was just the facts. It was just, here's what's going on. And that's it. But then something happened. And that something that happened was that I believe it was the late 60s. I could be wrong when this book was published. But there was a book that was written by William Luther Pierce, who is a racist, who was a Ku Klux Klan member. He wrote a book called The Turner Diaries. And if you Google this book and you look this book up, you will discover that this book was a fiction novel that told this story that basically Jews were in America trying to enact a master plan to basically rid of the white race and turn America over to all the minorities and the Jews, all the blacks and browns and Jews. Basically, this is kind of the main premise of this book. It was a fiction. It was extremely anti-Semitic and extremely racist and profoundly in support of segregation. This book got adopted by a group of people called the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society, this movement, and you can Google this movement, they were nuts. They were alt-right fringe lunatics. They were completely crazy. They believed in the great race replacement theory like you hear today, and all this like insane stuff that white people were under attack. Just fucking total insanity, these people. They believed a lot of crazy things. Back then, the person who ultimately, you could argue, was in charge of conservatism at the time was William F. Buckley Jr. He was the head of the National Review, which dominated what people considered conservative views back then. Dominated, completely controlled how people felt on the conservative spectrum. He literally espoused the John Birch movement. He couldn't stand them. He wanted nothing to do with them. He denounced them. He was like, I hate these people. Like, they're crazy. I don't want anything to do with them. They're anti-Semitic. They're pro-segregation. They're racist. And he was like, conservatives are not any of those things. That's just not what we believe and not who we are. Well, unfortunately, these people were like nuts, and they continued to push this movement, this John Birch Society movement. And eventually, and by the way, and this is something you could look up, Fred Trump, who was Donald Trump's father, was one of the top financiers and donors of the John Birch Society movement. Just wanted to let you know that. Now, what you take from that is up to you, but this is a truth. This is a fact, and everything I'm telling you is verifiable. Go on the internet and verify everything I'm saying. It's all true. And this movement, this anti-Semitic, racist, hateful, and completely unhinged lunatic movement that nobody wanted to give any validity towards at all, started to gain a little traction with, you had your Pat Buchanans, you had your Glenn Becks, people like that, but they were already trying to push things. At first, they were doing it through underground radio, like independent radio, like Rush Limbaugh. And they were trying to reach out to rural communities in America, like the farmers and people like that, to try to convince them that the government is corrupt and they're all a part of this liberal agenda to rid of white people, and the Jews are in control of it. And this was like a lot of what these people were talking about on these independent radio shows to try to get this crazy, unhinged, lunatic message out there. But then along came the internet in the mid-1990s. And at that point, these people, your Glenn Becks, your Pat Buchanans, your Alex Joneses, right? Your Rush Limbaughs, they began to embrace the internet. Because at the time that Rush Limbaugh was pushing this narrative on independent radio, so was Alex Jones. Alex Jones then decided to start pumping CDs. And I remember way back in like 1996, somebody handed me a CD and said, "Have you ever heard of Alex Jones? You should listen to this." And I listened to it, and it was extremely conspiratorial, and it was all this crazy stuff. And I remember being like intrigued by it, actually a little bit. Some of it, I was like, man, is this stuff true? It was alluring. It was alluring. But I digress. This movement began to gain traction and more traction and more traction until eventually what ended up happening was Alex Jones began to get lots of subscribers. He created the website InfoWars. Him and Rush Limbaugh kind of almost became on the same team. Glenn Beck, all these people started to kind of represent this sort of movement to continue to push this movement. And what their movement was, what the defining characteristic of that movement was basically that all the news and information that you're hearing, all the stuff that you're hearing at colleges, all the professors at universities, all the people that are giving you news and information, It's all to brainwash you to a liberal agenda. And that you need to hear the other side. The other side to reality? There was reality, and now they wanted to come in and say, oh no, your reality is really not truth. It's just an opinion. Your entire reality was formed from brainwashing you with liberal opinions. We want to be heard on our side, which was weird because they were trying to argue they were the conservative opinion, but even conservatives were like, they do not represent us. They do not represent us. They're an unhinged movement. They do not represent what conservatism is. But they wanted to hijack conservatism and say, no, we're conservatism. We're the new conservatism. We're the new age conservatism, and you need to listen to us. And the reason why everyone's telling you that we're crazy is because they just want to shove your whole reality is just made up of the news and information you got from a liberal agenda. This was their entire movement, the basis for it. Well, then it gained massive traction. InfoWars became incredibly popular. Alex Jones became even more popular. He started to have 3 million and then 4 million. I think at one point he had like 6.5 million people that were a part of his movement overall through YouTube, through InfoWars subscriptions. He had like 6.5 million people that really hung on every word he said. And then, there was the Sandy Hook incident, and people started to realize that this guy was a danger because of the nonsense that he was pushing. And they tried to remove him from YouTube. They tried to remove him from webs. Well, not tried. They did. They tried to they canceled him essentially, right? They tried to be like, no, you are done. And of course I guess I keep saying tried. They successfully did it, but not really, because he still just went underground, and all it did was it kind of martyred him a little bit. People like, see, he's telling the truth. That's why, YouTube and corporations like Google are shutting him down. They're trying to silence him because he's telling the truth. Crazy stuff. But then you fast forward to 2015 when Trump announces that he's running for president. And he hires Roger Stone to head that campaign. Roger Stone tells Donald Trump, if you want to win this election, the only way you're going to do it is if you reach out to these dejected people. And I say dejected because these people who supported Alex Jones and the Rush Limbaugh type people, independent radio, alt-right, unhinged, fringe, lunatic stuff, they didn't vote. They believed the government was evil, all this kind of shit, and they didn't vote. And he said, if you can get them to vote for you by making them feel like all this crazy shit that they believe, all these crazy conspiratorial beliefs, if you can go and make them valid, you can win an election. And then he did. He went on the Alex Jones not once, not twice, 3 times. And he spoke to his audience. And he told them, all the stuff you believe, it's all true. All the cockamamie nonsense that you believe about government hiding UFOs and Hillary Clinton running child sex trafficking rings and all this kind of crap. All of it. Yeah, it's all completely accurate, and I'm going to go in there and drain the swamp. I'm your hero. Vote for me. I'm going to go in there and drain the swamp. And what he did was he hijacked that cult that Alex Jones had cultivated and made it his own and used it to win the election. This is what happened. This is exactly what happened. And I witnessed this, and so did millions and millions and millions of other people. We witnessed this. Okay? And then, of course, Trump, through successful marketing as the president, really began to add validity to these conspiracies, brainwash a lot of young people, and then, of course, through social media and all that exploding. What I witnessed was that, again, and I'm going back to the Ku Klux Klan documentary concept that I was talking about at the beginning of this video, there is no other side. There is no other side. You shouldn't be racist. You shouldn't kill children. You shouldn't harm old people or animals, right? We all have like these sort of moral obligations. And there's certain things like women having rights to be able to vote, to be able to get a job, to be equal to you. Okay? Same thing with blacks. To be able to get a job, same as you, be equal to you, income-wise. There's just things that we know are morally just. And now, here comes this movement that says, no. That's all liberal brainwashing. We're here to give you the other side of the story of why it should be okay that we take away women's rights. Why it should be okay that we get rid of all these programs that help minorities become equal to white income and where it's at in this country, and all these things that made sense. We're going to give you the other argument of why it should be okay that people don't get health care, even though people do in every part of the world. And so we sit there, and I say we, meaning people like me, the vast majority of people I feel like that I talk to that are Democrats and on the left in any way, all kind of feel like this is exactly what happened. They created some sort of justification to hear the other side when there is no other side. Reality has a bias. It does. Because reality is reality. Facts are facts. And you can't go in there and say, oh, those facts you're hearing, that's liberal brainwashing. Let me present to you these other alt facts, because there's another side to the story. Just like the Ku Klux Klan documentary. And that's what we feel. And that is the reason why when somebody like Charlie Kirk gets murdered, that's why we say we get it. Not that we support it, because I don't support the murder of anybody. I specifically, vehemently do not support the murder of anybody unless they themselves are somebody who are directly or indirectly responsible for killing people themselves or harming people, vulnerable people, etc. Like, I am a firm believer that there are some people who deserve to fucking die, okay? But I do not believe Charlie Kirk was somebody who deserved to die under any circumstances. But what I am going to say is that from my perspective, and the perspective of many people that I speak to, we get it. And what I mean by we get it is that when you have a movement in this country that is trying to say, when a little kid, when a little 8-year-old Mexican girl or whatever she was, Guatemalan, whatever the fuck she was, when a little girl like 8 years old or whatever has cancer and gets deported, that's disgusting. When they're going into schools and grabbing children and deporting them with no due process, that's disgusting. When little kids are coming home from school and their parents are missing because ICE just came in with masks on and just illegally grabbed them, abducted them, and sent them off to wherever with no due process, that's disgusting. Okay? So when you support that, when you're vehemently going, when you're adamantly, I should say, going on YouTube and talking about why that's okay and trying to create a justification for why that behavior is okay, that is going to cause somebody to want to enact vengeance upon you. Make no mistake about that. So I understand it. I don't condone it, but I do understand it. Now, here's the other thing I want to discuss. When we talk about, whenever I ask somebody who supports this movement, I'm always like, how can you support this movement that is so cruel, that builds itself upon cruelty, essentially? Like we want to tell gay people that they have mental health issues. We want to tell trans kids they have mental health issues. We want to make it okay to bully again. We want to make it okay to bully them because you need to be tough to be an American. And we're becoming weak because of these kinds of people. This is the argument that I get back. That's the argument that I get back. That's it. So now this makes me want to bring up another point about this gender stuff that a lot of people really, because that always seems to be the thing. They always say, well, the Democrats and the liberals, they want to make everybody gay and they want to make everybody, different genders. Here's some facts. Okay? Everybody in the world other than the United States understands and respects that there's multiple genders. Because if you Google the word gender and look at its definition, it's not the same word as sex. You need to understand the difference between sex and gender. Understand that. The sex is male and female. You're born either male or female. Nobody is arguing with the fact that you're born either male or female. Nobody. That's not the argument. The argument is that if someone is born a male or a female, but they don't identify with those traits, that they can choose a gender for themselves, because gender is not sex. Sex is biological science. You're either male or female. Gender is a matter of opinion. Gender is up to you, what you decide. Look up the word, look up the definition. And this is the lie that keeps on being predicated by people like Charlie Kirk, who want to go to colleges and try to get people in a gotcha moment and be like, see, gender is biological. Gender is not biological. Sex is biological. Gender is a matter of opinion of how you like to see yourself and identify yourself. Those are two different things. So if you have a kid who's born a woman and says, you know what, I know I'm a woman. She knows she's a woman. She knows biologically she was born a woman, but maybe she's got, a little bit more testosterone than most women. So she's got a little bit of hair on her face, and maybe that makes her feel less feminine. And when she looks at girls painting their nails and wearing skirts and buying heels and wearing perfume, she doesn't get it because she'd rather wear sweatpants and go play soccer with the boys. And she starts to say, you know what, I just don't really identify with being a woman. I know I'm a woman, but I don't identify with it. She has a right to do that. And every country in the world respects that. Every country in the world respects that right, except this one. We tell them they have a mental health issue and make them feel bad about it and try to silence them and try to ostracize them for feeling that way. That's what we're doing. And then we blame the schools. The schools are the reason why my kid feel... It's not the schools, man. It's the internet. And why is it the internet? Because here's why. The internet is global. We no longer have America and China and Australia and Norway and Sweden and Canada. We don't have that anymore. We have the internet. And everybody's on it. All over the world. So though for our generation, my generation, I'm 47 years old. When I was growing up, we didn't have that. We didn't have cell phones and the internet. We couldn't access what everyone in Australia was thinking or Norway was thinking. We only knew what was going on in this country and how things were here. But the kids today, since the iPhones come out, since the internet has become readily available everywhere, they have a lot more access on TikTok and Instagram to hear what's going on in other countries, to hear kids their age talk about how things are in their country, where it's okay to have a spectrum of genders. And because it's perfectly normal and has been respected for hundreds of years in every other country around the world, except this one. And so they get this information and they say, man, that's kind of like how I am. I want to be more like that. And then it starts to trend, and kids from social media, it's like, oh, we should change our name to a non-binary name. That would be kind of cool, because being binary is kind of like uncool now. This is all just young people doing what young people do, adopting new ideas and trying to be different because that's what every generation does. They rebel against the older generation, and that's what they want to do. Now, you say, well, why do the schools allow it? Well, I'll tell you why. They don't want to get sued. Because when you have a kid that says, you know, Mom, I know I was born a woman, but I just don't relate to that, and I want to be, my gender that I choose for myself, because that's what a gender is I gender identify with kind of being a boy. And I kind of want to be referred to as a boy at school. It'll make me feel better about myself. And now this helicopter mom who cares about her kids' feelings goes and creates an IEP at the school. I think that's what you call them, IEP or IDP. I can't remember. I think it's IEP, and which is a document at schools that the school has to follow on your child or there's major problems. And they say that, I want you to refer to my kid as this. This is what makes him feel better. And what happens? The school says, fuck, well, we better do that because we don't want her coming down here going, you call my child XYZ when they want to be called ABC, and now you're going to get sued and I'm suing you. So schools are complying. But this idea that you think teachers in the Department of Education is brainwashing your kid to think like this is insane. If teachers had any effect on kids at all, they'd do their homework. They would do their schoolwork, but they don't. Remember when you were a kid? Remember when you were a kid in school? Did you give a fuck what your teacher said? Your teacher had all this effect on you? Your teacher and what they told you about life and how you should live it? Yeah, right. We didn't give a fuck. Nobody gave a fuck what the goddamn teacher said. This is insanity. Schools are not brainwashing your kids to be anything, but this is the lie that this alt-right fringe lunatic movement that's hijacked our fucking country keeps telling you. Oh, we're going to slash the Department of Education and force your state to have to cover the cost, which like somewhere like 35 to 40 states in the country can't even afford to cover the cost of their own education without government help. I live in California. California is responsible for paying most of the fucking bills in the United States because we bring so much money into the pool. And that's what's really helping is we give our money to the government. The government has enough to help every state have their education paid for. But he says, I'm going to slash the Department of Education so that every single state in the country is going to have to finance their own education. There's only like 10 states that can afford to do that. So now kids are going to have no education. And you support that because you're like, good, they're brainwashing my kid to be gay. They're brainwashing my kid to be, gender fluid and all this. And it's like, dude, it's misinformation. Again, you're buying into the lunatic fringe narrative that popped up on the scene in the last 15, 20 years and is hijacking truth. Trying to give you another side, an alternate way to look at reality. When there is no alternate way to look at reality, there's only one way to look at reality, and that is the truth and facts. But anyways, so this brings me to my next point, which is radicals, political radicals. I want to talk about this because this is very important. Radical behavior on the right and the left. I hear people say it all the time. Well, there's radicals on both sides. There's radicals on both sides. That's true. There's radicals on both sides. But we need to distinguish between the radicals on both sides. We need to distinguish between them because you have radicals on one side. Okay, let's describe the radical on the right. The radical on the right is like a fucking Nazi, a psycho fucking neo-Nazi, a warmonger, someone who's fucking super nationalist. America fucking is, it's all about only our country. Get rid of immigrants. Get rid of all these people. White supremacy. Sometimes there's these people with this really hardcore white supremacist attitude, and they'll post something on Twitter, and the left will go crazy and go, look at this racist guy. And what does the right say? Not all of us are like that. That's just a crazy radical. Sure, but he is a radical on the offensive. He is an offensive radical. He wants to get rid of immigrants. He wants to feel like he's superior to people of color. He wants all white people in his neighborhood. He wants women in their place. He wants women to have no rights and do what they're told. These crazy right-wingers. And what right-wing radical people we're talking. Not people on the right, but the radicals we're talking about. The extremists on both sides. Okay? So the extremist right-winger wants women to have less rights, wants gay people to be executed or given the death penalty or treated like they have mental illness. The extremist right-winger's on the offensive. He wants black people to not work at the same place as him. He wants less black people in his neighborhood, whatever. These are the extreme radical right. Now let's talk about the extreme radical left. Who are they? They're the dyed-haired college kids that are the trans kids that the extremist on the right who is on the offensive is attacking. The trans kid on the left, the radical left, is reacting to a movement that is telling them that they have mental health disorders because they're trans. The gay kid on the far, far extreme left is reacting. The extremist on the left who might be gay is reacting to people telling him that being gay is a mental illness. The extreme kid on the far left is a minority who is reacting to a movement that wants his parents kicked out of the country simply because they haven't had their immigration paperwork looked at yet after 8 to 10 years. So the extremist radical on the left, yes, they're a radical, but they're a reactionary radical. They're on the defensive. And it's very important to distinguish the difference between a radical on the offensive and a radical on the defensive. And when you have a movement like this alt-right fringe movement that Trump has grabbed a hold of, this Alex Jones, this Rush Limbaugh movement, Pat Buchanan, Glenn Beck, and then it gets honed in on by somebody like Charlie Kirk, who supports it because he's way up high in the Church of Latter-day Saints, and this type of alt-right fringe stuff appeals to the people at the Church of Latter-day Saints. I saw Charlie Kirk give a speech at a college, and this girl got up in the crowd. This is a video you could find on YouTube, I'm sure, if you just do a little digging. She gets up in the crowd and she says, there's hundreds, maybe even 1,000 people, a lot of people in the crowd. But she gets up and she says, "Hey, Charlie, I have a question for you. I want to do what you do. I want to be a political activist like you, who's on YouTube, who becomes like a YouTuber that gets to go around and talk about politics, etc." And she says, "What college classes do you recommend I take to do that?" Now, Charlie Kirk in that moment could have been somebody that said, "You know what? You should take oral communications, learn how to speak, maybe take a communications course of some kind, communications and media. All of this stuff will help you learn some traits, maybe even learn, film editing, some creative stuff like film editing, because you might be editing your videos. You might want to get better at that." But no, he didn't say that. He didn't say any of that. She asked him this question. You know what he said? He looked at her and he said, "You shouldn't go to college at all because it's a scam." First is what he said. Then he said, No. I take that back. No, you should go to college, but you want to know why you should go to college? There's only one reason why you should go to college, and it's to find your boyfriend, find your future husband. Go to college to meet a guy and fall in love and have his baby and raise that child and be a mother, because that's what you're on this earth to do. That's what you should do, not go to college to become educated. It's a waste of time. Go meet your boyfriend, have a baby, and be a mother. That's what he told her. And the whole fucking place erupted in applause, like as if he had just said some of the most greatest wisdom anybody has ever heard. Think about that for a moment. So he's essentially telling a girl, don't have a career. Don't be worried about trying to become successful or just go get pregnant and be a mom. Because that's very appealing to someone who's high up in the Church of Latter-day Saints. It speaks to him. But again, you're walking back on women and their rights. This is exactly the kind of mentality that's going to eventually lead it to just let men vote. Let the men vote. Let us make that decision. You just be a mom and take care of the babies. That's where it leads. That's where that goes. So, when you have somebody like Charlie Kirk going out there being one of the strongest voices of this crazy unhinged movement that wants to make it okay for immigrants to be kicked out of the country without due process, make it okay for gay people to be called, have mental health disorders or whatever. He cited Leviticus as a reason why gay people should essentially be executed for their sexual preferences. He said these things. He voiced that he hated the word empathy and that he thought it was toxic because it was just used for political reasons and all this stuff. Empathy. A man who considers himself a Christian. He hates the word. And you go around and you promote this stuff. You are essentially promoting a narrative that is making people, whether they're immigrants or gay or trans or whatever they are, women or whatever, feel like they're not valid. Feel like there's something wrong with them. You're making them feel, he made a living off of making them feel ostracized. He made a living off of making them feel attacked. And what do you think that's going to lead to? You think you're just going to show up at colleges with no security and no defense and just stand there and insult and defend bad actions that are being taken against people when masked secret police come up and beat somebody down and drag them off and disappear them with no due process, and you go, that's okay, and here's why that's okay? When that's affecting families and people's lives, you don't think somebody's going to eventually shoot you? Think about it, guys. So we get it. We get it. And that's what I mean when I say we get it. Because let me just explain it to you like this. I like to call this the pillar and platform analogy. Okay? America's government is like a giant platform, a flat platform being held up by two pillars. One of those pillars is Republican and conservative. One of those pillars is Democratic and liberal. There are two pillars that are holding up the platform. And anyone who says that entire other pillar needs to be destroyed is an idiot. Because when you destroy that pillar, whether it's one pillar or the other, the whole platform comes falling down. The whole thing comes crashing down. So anytime you hear somebody say there should be no Republicans, they're all toxic, they're all racist, they're all terrible, fuck Republicans, fuck conservatives, they all should fucking, blah, blah, blah. They shouldn't exist. That's fascism. That's a fascist authoritarian ideology to believe that there should be no other political viewpoint, that it should only be what you believe. And it's the same thing when Donald Trump gets up there and says all the liberals are toxic and we should abolish them. They need to be completely silenced and removed. They're anti-American and all this. You are essentially trying to get rid of one of the fucking pillars. Because what makes America America is that we have two different sides that fight and argue on politics. And it will always be that way, and it should always be that way because that's called democracy. It's called democracy, folks. There are people who don't agree with you. So if you're somebody who says, you shot Charlie Kirk because he doesn't agree with you, yeah. Whoever fucking shot Charlie Kirk should be fucking thrown in prison and given the death penalty for murdering a father and a husband because you didn't like his views. Abso-fucking-lutely. I absolutely, vehemently support that. 1,000%. But you can't be at the same time that you sit there and say that, okay with the fact that Donald Trump gets up there and says all the liberals need to be abolished. Or we should take the United States military and run them through liberal cities and give people no due process and just take out criminals. Because guess what? You're doing the same fucking thing. You're doing the same thing. You're supporting a man who doesn't agree with the other side. That's what you're doing. If Trump gets up there and he says the other side is crazy, Democrats are, he's called Democrats and liberals terrorists, anti-American, that they need to be abolished. He said this shit all throughout his presidencies. And if you support that, you're no better than the person who shot Charlie Kirk, man. You're no better than the person who shot Charlie Kirk. Now, where does this come from? Where does this come from? Well, I mean, look, social media is radicalizing everybody because social media has algorithms and it's designed intentionally to create, it's designed to create engagement. It wants you to like and share and comment and engage with the post. So, of course, everybody's going to give you the most radical thing that somebody said. Everyone's going to say, oh, let me point to this one guy who cheered because Charlie Kirk was murdered. And you're going to see a lot of that if you're in support of Charlie Kirk. The algorithms on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok know what you support, and they know how to get you to argue and engage. And it's going to flood you algorithmically with a lot of it so that you start to have a view of the world that everybody on the other side supports Charlie Kirk's murder when it's just not true. It's just not true. And it's the same thing for Democrats. When you're on the phone, you're being fed a bunch of Republican Republican crap that isn't exactly how a lot of conservatives think either. I speak to conservatives on a regular basis, and so many of them don't even remotely think what the internet would have you think they think. It's algorithms and people looking for attention on the internet, trying to get likes and comments and engagement that want to take things to the most extreme and convince you that people out there are the most extreme, and you're fucking falling for it. Regardless of where you are politically with your beliefs, you're falling for it. And then when you have leaders like Donald Trump, who didn't lower the flag at half-mast when Senator Melissa Hortman was murdered by a MAGA and her husband. He didn't do that, did he? He didn't even bring up the fact that there was a school shooting on the same day that Charlie Kirk was shot. But he's going to lower that flag to half-mast for Charlie Kirk because he loved Donald Trump and supported him. Because this president doesn't give a fuck about anything other than how you treated him. He doesn't give a fuck about our economy, how you're doing, how your pockets are doing. He doesn't give a fuck about your politics or your views. He doesn't give a fuck or stand for anything other than what's best for Trump. Who treated me right? That's why when you watch him in meetings in the White House, everybody's sycophantically kissing his ass. Because they know the only thing Trump cares about is how you treat him. Mistreat him, he'll take away your license. He'll unlawfully use the power of his presidency to destroy your business, to do anything he can to ruin you simply because you don't agree with him. Simply because you don't agree with him. The same thing that the person who killed Charlie Kirk, simply because he didn't agree with him. So, speech absolutely should be free. But let's not pretend that free speech is void of consequences. There are consequences to free speech. And there always have been, and there always will be consequences to free speech. Period. But let's not sit here and pretend, okay, like we don't have a problem as a society where everybody just wants to give free speech to those who speak what they want to hear and take it away from people who disagree with them. Donald Trump is the president of America, and that's how he is. He wants to silence people who don't agree with him. He threatened to take away broadcasting licenses from networks simply for running stories he didn't agree with. Okay? That's what you're dealing with. He goes on national television and tells everybody that liberals are the enemy of the country simply because they don't agree with him. So if you have a leader that thinks it's okay to shut down one side simply because you don't agree with them, then don't be fucking surprised when someone shoots your fucking hero simply because they don't agree with him.